I'm Krista Niddle, and I'm part of People for Justice and Peace in Palestine. And we're a local, all-volunteer group. And I want to especially thank our volunteer videographer and volunteer musician, and we have a volunteer security team. And if you want to join us, why doesn't everybody who's already in the group stand up? And you can talk to some, if you wish. And you can, if you want to get to know more. And we also have a sign-up sheet on the table if you want to be notified of future events. Also, if you have a volunteer skill you wish to share. And also, if you're interested in nonviolent direct action, because some of us are talking about that. And there's also a donation jar. The money goes to hungry people in Palestine. And there's a petition to our elected representatives, and also books by Jonathan and others. And now Ibrahim Hamida is going to introduce our guest speaker.
So before I do that, could we have a moment of silence for all the victims, Jewish and Palestinians, that have passed in their 2-year war that's been devastating? Thank you. So I'm introducing Jonathan Kuttab. He's the co-founder of the Palestinian human rights group called Al-Haq, which means the truth in Arabic, and co-founder of Nonviolence International, a well-known international human rights attorney. Jonathan practices in the U.S., Palestine, and in Israel. He serves on the board of Bethlehem Bible College and is the president of the board of the Holy Land Trust. Jonathan was the head of the legal committee negotiating the Cairo Agreement in 1994 between Israel and the PLO. After graduating with his doctorate in jurisprudence, JD, from Virginia Law School, and practicing a couple of years on Wall Street, Jonathan returned home to Palestine. Jonathan was a visiting scholar of the Osgood Law School at York University in Toronto in the fall of 2017, as a founding director of Justice Advocate Movement, which has a French name that I cannot do very well. A Canadian-based international law human rights, not-for-profit organization. Jonathan is currently the executive director of Friends of Sub-Saharan North America, or FASNA for short. Please welcome Jonathan Kuttab.
Thank you very much. The topic that has been assigned to me is to try and give you a view of what I think the future is going to be like for Palestine, Israel, Holy Land, whatever you want to call And it's a very important question to ask because I think people recognize the current situation as a critical moment when people are really being called upon to do some new thinking, where we can't continue with the old process of thinking which hasn't gotten us anywhere. Where the situation is really a situation of crisis, not just for the people of Israel and Palestine, but for the entire world, because the foundations on which international law, international relations have been built are being questioned and are being ignored. And I don't mean that only in the legal sense, that people no longer, respect international law and international conventions and international courts and international relations are being openly disregarded, but also because we see before our eyes things that used to occur only in the dark, that people would look at, years after, oh, we didn't know these things were happening. How is it possible that something like that could take place? This is what people were saying about the Holocaust. We didn't know that it was happening, whether they knew or not. Today, there is no question. Everybody knows. It's out there. There's a good reason why people refuse to call it by its name, genocide, because if you do, then there are consequences. If this is actually a genocide taking place, then there's a legal obligation to do something about it. And failure to do something about it is a violation of international law and of your own human obligation as a human being. How could that happen? Things that used to be done in the dark are now being done openly. Using starvation as a weapon, determining how much food is going to be allowed in or not. Removing the distinction between combatant and non-combatant. Creating a new category called Hamas. So whether you are armed or unarmed, whether you're a doctor or a policeman or a firefighter or a teacher, if you can be labeled Hamas, then both you and your family and your institution are legitimate target that can be destroyed with everything around it. Doesn't work. We can't live in a world that is so lacking in standards, in values, in principles, in laws and obligations. If that is true, and if we really care at all about those human beings called Israelis or Palestinians or Arabs or Jews, whatever, then we must do some soul searching. We must go back to the principles and say, what is this conflict all about? What are the ideologies? What are the thought processes? What's the problem? Why can't we solve it? And as a person who's been very involved in this for quite some time, I'd like to present you with a formula, tries as much as possible to be non-judgmental. And I would like to say that without making any false equivalency between the two sides, because there isn't. We see two movements or two ideologies or two groups. that have diametrically opposite ideas. One of them, and I'll start with the Palestinian one, says Palestine Arabi, Palestine is Arab. What are you talking about? People living in Palestine can be Jewish, Christian, or Muslim, but they're Arabs. And they've been there for centuries. They've lived together, for better or for worse. And they want to be free, they want to be democratic, and they want to live in an independent society. We were part of the third world that got rid of colonialism and imperialism. And this is who we are. We belong to the land. We are part of it. You can't just come in from all over the world and say, you know, this is your place and not ours, and we don't belong here. We belong to the land. This is our land. And this force, which I will briefly call Palestinian nationalism or Palestinian Arab nationalism, has to deal with another force which I will call Zionism. I know there are different kinds of Zionism, but the kind that prevailed and that we are experiencing today says we want a place, a state that's as Jewish as France is French. We want a Jewish state because we've been persecuted all over the world, particularly in the Western Christian world. And the persecution reached its height in the Holocaust. We can't trust anybody. We can't trust international law. We want our own state to be as Jewish as France is French. The old slogan was a land without a people for a people without a land. And what better place than our ancient homeland of 3,000 years ago, where we once had a state in which we're connected to historically, religiously, whatever reason. It belongs to us. Anybody else living there, really don't belong. Let them go somewhere else. Let them find a solution somewhere else. So these two movements, these two ideologies, let's face it, are mutually exclusive and are caught in a zero-sum conflict. The more we have, the less they have. And the elements of that conflict are demography and land. The more people we can bring in, Jews, and keep out, Arabs, the more Jewish we can become. And for the Arabs, it's our land. What do you mean? What are you talking about? Where do we go? This is our land. We don't go somewhere else. And land becomes important also. Ownership and use of the land, not only in terms of who owns it, is it a Jewish or a non-Jewish person, but then it becomes institutional. That land that we take and put in the public domain is here to serve only Jews and to serve them forever, and it should not be alienated. At best, we will give it a 49-year lease and only to a Jewish person. The state, the Jewish state, will ultimately own it, not the individual. So these two movements are in conflict, are in contradiction. Again, I'm trying desperately to avoid making judgments, moral, historical, or legal. And please be clear, I am not saying the two claims, the two ideologies are in any way equivalent or similar. But they are there, and each group has a lot of supporters outside who are pumping money, diplomatic support, weapons in to its group at the expense of the other. 1948, 47 actually before that, with the help of Great Britain and many other countries, you brought in more and more Jews in because they were being kicked out of Europe. or fleeing the Nazi onslaught. And the Arabs were seeing their land being inundated, and they were afraid that they will become minority in their own land. So they resisted, they refused to accept it. And so somebody said, let's divide it and make it a Jewish. And I said, why do we divide my country and give up most of it to somebody else who's just coming just because they were persecuted in Europe? It's not our fault. So the Arabs rejected the British resolution. The Jews said, yes, we'll take it for the time being because we really want more, but we'll take it for now. And that's how the State of Israel was created in 1948. The Arabs did not accept that, and the Jews were very glad that now they have taken the land and made sure that most of its population was kept out, very important. Now, they'll tell you they left on their own, or their own leaders told them to leave, regardless. The truth is, for whatever reason they left, they were not allowed back in. Because how could you allow them back in? If you're trying to create a Jewish state, you wanted more Jews to come in, and you wanted more non-Jews to be out. 1967, very pivotal time, when there was another war, the 67 war. Don't tell me who started it, because the ones who actually started shooting were the Israelis, but they claimed it was preemptive self-defense. We knew they were going to attack us, so we attacked them first. Never mind who started it, it was a defensive war. And we ended up winning, we took all the land. But we really didn't want to take the land because, we want peace. And we're willing to give back that land in return for peace. If they will accept that we keep 78% of Palestine, they can have the rest of the land, the 22%, and they can do whatever they want with it. That's what I call the Great Compromise. That so-called two-state solution. It was a big deception, actually. We now know. The Israelis never intended to give up that land. And why do we know? Because they started putting up Jewish settlement all over the West Bank and Gaza. And they started settling Jews there to the point where today there's 800,000 Jewish settlers living in the occupied territories. And they, not only physically the number of Jews who moved in, but the structures that were created. The legal structures with separate courts, separate laws, separate roads, separate services, separate everything. One set for the Jews and one set for the non-Jews. I happen to be, like many of you probably, like many churches, like many states, we thought this compromise of a two-state solution was a reasonable compromise. Not the best, not the most fair, but one that made sense. Especially since the state of Israel said, we don't want this land. We didn't start this war to take land. All we want is peace. So it was land for peace. We'll give you back the land that we took in 67. In return, you accept the Jewish state and you allow us to have the land we took before 67. Jerusalem, we'll take it. We'll keep it. But we want an exit formally. We will call it, we'll apply Israeli law and administration to it. And we'll basically keep it. But it will be up for negotiations. And the Arab world says, okay, all right, we'll accept that. The Arab peace plan or the Saudi peace plan was, we will accept Israel, we will have total and full peace and normalization and everything else. You'll go back to the 67 borders and maybe we will share Jerusalem. And the Israelis were not interested. At some point, I and many others realized that the two-state solution is not going to happen. That so many changes were made, so many facts were created on the ground, so much was done psychologically to integrate the occupied territories and keep it under Israeli control, that it was no longer possible to really talk about the two-state solution. Nonetheless, people continue to talk about it. It continues to be the official position of many groups, including some churches, including countries of the United Nations. So when I reached the point where I realized the two-state solution was not going to happen, so what do we do then? How do we deal with this new reality? The new reality is that there are two groups that are living in the land today, roughly 7 million each. 7 million Jews and 7 million non-Jews, Palestinian Arab. Now, it's true the Arabs are fragmented into Gaza, West Bank, East Jerusalem, what's called Israeli Arabs, who are Palestinians with Israeli passports, as well as a large group who are refugees outside, no right of return, no hope of returning. But the reality is the two groups today coexist and live in the same land under one regime, which is the Israeli regime, which has fragmented and subdivided them into different localities. Now, when the Palestinians rise up, as happened during the Intifada, or when they resist with military force, as happened October 7, then the Israelis say, we're being attacked. Our security is impinged. We want peace, but we want to keep all the land. We want peace, but we want control. So, what is the solution? Is there a solution? Is it possible to satisfy the needs of both sides? I happen to think it is. In fact, I'm bold enough to say that there is a solution that can give each side everything its ideology demands, except for exclusivity. In other words, you can have what you want as long as the other side also has something. Now, I remember talking to a rabbi in New Jersey, and I said, please explain this to me. You are a Zionist, you want a Jewish state, right? What's a Jewish state? What does a Jewish state do for you? Why do you want a Jewish state? I mean, what is a Jewish state, after all? You can't circumcise a piece of rock. And he says, well, after everything that happened to us, I want a place where any Jew, anywhere, anytime, no questions asked, can go and live and be able to defend himself. I got inspired. I said, I can give you something better. How about a state where any Jew, anywhere, anytime, no questions asked, can go and live when he doesn't need to defend himself? Because nobody's out to get him. Is that possible? Yes. You only have to give up one thing. exclusivity. You have to change your ideology, your Zionism, to incorporate the possibility of somebody else also living in the land with full rights and full dignity and full expression. And I too, as a Palestinian, have to change my ideology. Where I talk about Palestinian Arabs, Palestine is Arab. Half the people living in it are not Arab. They're Jewish. And they're going nowhere. So yes, it can be Palestinian Arabs, but also Jewish. Is it possible to have a state that is both Jewish and Arab at the same time? That guarantees the rights of both. So I said, I'm going to do a little thought experiment. I'm going to ask my Jewish friends, as I did the rabbi, what is it that you want? What does Zionism promise you? Well, we want a state that follows the Jewish calendar, whether we are religious or not. Good. Can be done. We want a state with a right of return for Jews. So any Jew anywhere who's persecuted can come and live here as of right. Can be done. What else? Well, we want freedom, democracy, to participate in the life of the country. Can be done. And I asked my Palestinian friends, what is it that we really want? Why do we want a state? Why do we want a state? Why do we want a Palestinian state? Well, so that we can be free. Okay? We want a passport. Why? So that we can travel. If you give me a passport, but you don't allow me to travel, to leave, and to come, what good is it to me? We want dignity, equality, our language, our culture. Can be done. Can be done. Both of them can be done if we give up the concept of exclusivity. In fact, I would argue that you end up with a state that is better for Jews than the state of Israel. And better for Palestinian Arabs than any of the Arab states that we see around us. So I set up to write up this idea in a little book called Beyond the Two-State Solution. It's available out there, or you can download it for free if you want. It even has a little exclusive executive summary that describes it in a few pages. It requires a constitution that protects each group as well as the individual from the caprice of the majority. So that whoever has 51% of the electoral college votes can still say, this is my country, and can still feel protected. See, people have the wrong idea of what democracy is. Democracy doesn't mean that 51% can trample the rights of the minorities or of the individual. Right? If you do that also, you don't have to worry about the demographic demon who has more people. Because people can vote then for whoever they want. And not necessarily vote always on their ethnic identity. And yes, the majority will control the government, but then they will be controlled by the Constitution. They can't pass laws and they can't have practices that violate the rights of the minority. There has to be some very clear, robust mechanisms to ensure that whoever has 51% will not be able to trample the rights of the others. So I started writing this thing up. I say, well, what's wrong with it? What are the objections? Well, somebody says, what about security? The Israelis are so obsessed with security. Okay, I can understand that. So we'll have a mechanism. Actually, I have two solutions for Israeli security. The first is, all right, the defense minister, the head of the army, navy, and air force, and nuclear commission, whatever, will always be a Jewish person with an Arab deputy. But the head of the internal security, the police security services, will always be a Palestinian Arab with a Jewish deputy. Because we also have our history. We also have suffered from people discriminating against us. Every other position in the army or the navy or the police will be on the basis of merit, and those who do not wish to fight and participate, like myself, I'm a pacifist, can do national service that is appropriate. Secondly, 10% of the defense budget has to go to a special department to deal with the causes of hatred and enmity and injustice between Arabs and Jews. Teach people each other's language and tradition and history. Work on joint programs. Work on dealing with the trauma that you have experienced. Work on compensation and dealing with the injustices that have happened. Because frankly, the biggest danger to Jewish Israelis today doesn't come from Iran or Turkey, it comes from a 12-year-old Palestinian girl with a scissors in her pocket that she wants to stick into somebody. And she doesn't care who or why or what. Because she feels injustice. If you can address the feelings of injustice. You want the right of return? Well and good. But so do Palestinians. They want the right of return. And you don't have to kick anybody out of their homes. Whether they're living in an Arab house in Jaffa that they took over, or in a settlement that they took over in the West Bank, they can stay there. Not as lords and masters, but on the basis of equality. And the owner of that house or land will get compensation, other land, other housing from the public sector. Because the public now is not the Jewish public. It's the entire public of the new state. And yes, you can absorb refugees. Israel knows how to do that very well. You can absorb the refugees who are returning. They don't have to kick anybody out of their house. They can find them new housing, new land, new opportunities, new training. You can have a proper society. Well, what happens when the Arabs become the majority? Well, you have to have mechanisms in place and institutions to defend whoever is in the minority. There has to be a constitutional court. You see, maybe it's because I'm a lawyer, but I understand how a constitution is above and beyond the legislature. So if people pass a law that is discriminatory, that's unconstitutional. If a government carries out activities that are discriminatory or racist, that's unconstitutional. There has to be a constitutional court with 2 Arab, 2 Jewish judges at least out of 5, and the decisions have to be majority decisions. Because you want to create a mechanism that lives for the future, not just for the current situation. Well, I wrote this book, and I published it in Arabic, and in Hebrew, and in English. And I was waiting for responses. Tell me, is there anything wrong with this mechanism, with this idea? Maybe it's not the only solution. Maybe there are other solutions. But at its roots, it is based on giving up the current ideologies which have not served their people. Ideologies based on supremacy, ideologies based on exclusivity, ideologies based on who has power and can force their will upon others. That does not work. Does not work. Has not worked. I think Palestinians are quite convinced of that. Maybe the Israelis need to be convinced that pure power alone will never get you security, will never get you even survival. Now, the truth is, neither side, the Palestinians nor the Israeli side, can survive for very long without the support of outside forces, who can either be part of the problem or part of the solution. And there's no reason why they couldn't be part of the solution, because Palestine, the Holy Land, is in fact very significant for Arabs and for Jews. It's significant for Christians and Muslims and Jews. They all care what happens. It's the Holy Land. It's the place where the religions started. So why doesn't this Holy Land become a place for cooperation, coexistence, understanding, that's open to everybody, but that's not exclusive to anybody? Whether you're talking about Jerusalem, I mean, who dare say that Jerusalem is only for Christians? The Crusaders used to think so. Or only for Muslims. Or only for Jews. It's important for all three. Now, I'll tell you another thing that, at least my way of thinking, my model of thinking is very positive. You need to have in Palestine civil courts as well as religious courts. Why? Because the current system does not give people full rights, including Jews. Did you know that? If you are a Jewish person who is conservative or reform, you are not recognized in Israel. You cannot marry in Israel. You cannot inherit. You cannot live your life, because Zionism made a deal with the Orthodox Jews that the Orthodox only will have jurisdiction in all personal status matters relating to Jews. Did you know that? The head of Israel's Supreme Court, Chaim Cohen, could not marry the love of his life because she was a divorcee. He's a Cohen. Cohens are only supposed to marry virgins. And she's a divorcee. He had to go to New York and get married there to come back and live in Israel as man and wife with her. People don't know that. Because the state of Israel is really messed up. As is the Arab world, many countries in the Arab world. Jordan is the same, Palestine is the same. They have religious courts that have exclusive jurisdiction in personal status affairs. So you can have your religious freedom only if the state is willing both to recognize your religious courts, but also to give you an option to have civil marriage, particularly if your denomination or religion is not recognized by the state. By the way, Methodist is not one of the recognized states. They're not. The only Protestant ones that are recognized are the Lutherans and the Anglicans, and that's because of colonial pressure. Baptists aren't, everybody else isn't. And people who have mixed marriages, God forbid, they don't have religious freedom. So we need new formulae that address the needs of people rather than have the people serve the needs of their ideologies. And again, I say that for Palestinians as well as I say it for Israelis. We need new formulae. We need a new form of government that ends oppression, that ends occupation, that ends military reliance on the military. Now, I happen to be a pacifist. I don't think violence solves anybody's problems. We need to recognize that in Palestine, of all places, violence does not work. It doesn't. It creates destruction. It creates hatred. It creates bitterness and enmities that continue for generations. It creates destruction and traumas that we have to live with for many generations to come and pay the price. At best, it allows you to dominate as long as you are powerful, but sooner or later, you will be weaker. Sooner or later, somebody even with no power, as Hamas showed on October 7th, without an air force, without any tanks, without any military industry that's worth anything, without even lines of supply, they managed to shock the Israeli system and capture military bases, 3 military bases. You didn't know that. You thought all they did was go around and hit civilians. They actually captured 3 military bases, killed over 230 soldiers, and captured 51, including the headquarters of the Gaza Brigade. I know you thought all they did was go around killing civilians and raping women and beheading children, babies. The truth is, both Israeli Jews and Palestinian Arabs desperately need new ideas. Ideas based on equality, based on dignity, based on humanity, that are not based on exclusivity. And it is possible. And anybody who fails to provide humanity to the other party is not doing their group any favors. The crisis that we see now within the American Jewish community, for example, is huge. Because there are so many decent people who cannot live with what Israel is doing. Not because they love the Palestinians, but because what's happening is so contrary to their values and beliefs and morality. And for Palestinians also, violence does not work. Not that we don't have the right to defend ourselves. Everybody talks about Israel's right to defend itself, right? We have the right to defend ourselves too. But armed resistance and violence does not work for us either. We must find a new pathway for peace. Always happens. I take too long. So, I will give you an opportunity now to maybe challenge and question me, but I would like to end with a positive note. There will be a new future for Palestinians and Israelis in Israel, Palestine, in this land. But it's only based on equality, human rights, and self-respect. It is not based on eternal enmity. It is not based on superiority. It is not based on dehumanizing the other side. Thank you very much.
All right, I see a hand up for a question. I am sorry, unless you have a loud voice, I want you to come here because this is the only microphone we have. So come and ask your question, and then Jonathan will respond.
I love your presentation. I'm sorry. I love your presentation, and I have a constitutional question, I think it is. So the United States made a bunch of compromises with the slave states, and we're still living with that garbage. This business of a Senate that where my buddy in Casper, Wyoming has much more power than I have. So, yeah, okay, great. So if you build into a state that actually where people start getting along, where you have to have certain people Jewish, way up in power, and certain people, did you say Palestinian?
Yeah.
But, so for one thing, some Palestinians were Jewish in 1947, and if this is a state where people get along, in a few generations, they're going to forget about their religions, and they're all going to get married. And if you have some law that you have to be Jewish, and you have to be something else.
No. Okay. Good question. My proposal is not an ideal proposal, but it is a workable proposal. It meets the needs of people where they are today. And where people are today is that the vast majority of Israeli Jews are not willing to make compromise with Palestinians because they are stuck with this security mentality. I need to satisfy their security needs, but I need to build in protections for everybody else. Some people said maybe there should be a what's called a midnight provision, that this provision is only good for 50 years.
Sunset clause.
A what?
Sunset.
A sunset clause for 50 years. Maybe that's possible. But the truth is, we are so far from that ideal that you think of when people no longer care whether they are Jewish or not, or whether they are Palestinian or not. Certainly, it's an idea to think about, but right now, we need something practical that people can live with. And right now, a nuclear-armed Israel is not going to accept or give up or think of any solution that does not address its security needs and its security fears. And I'm trying to address them without at the same time ignoring the Palestinian fears and the Palestinian needs. Because we suffer also under the police and the Shin Bet and the security services and what they do to us. So it doesn't mean that everybody in the army will have to be Jewish or in the police has to be Palestinian. But it gives a sense of satisfaction, a sense of guarantee. And I think more importantly will be the second part, which is we must build new relationships. We must have the outside world guarantee this agreement instead of undermine it. Everybody has an investment in making this work. So yes, it is not perfect. I totally agree with you. But it's at least an attempt in the right direction.
My name is Mark Rabinowitz. Can you hear him? The question I have is, I read Ali Abunimah's book, One Country, about 15 years ago, and I'm persuaded. But my understanding is very few Israeli Jews are similarly persuaded. And do you have a sense that support for that on the Jewish side has gone up or down, or sideways or anything?
Good. Very good question. The question is, do you think that more Israelis would support that kind of a one-state solution or less? And the answer is, right now, the answer is less. Right now, the right wing in Israel is very dominant. But that's only to be expected. Right now, the supremacy, the Jewish supremacy in Israel is blatant. Very few people in Israel today would talk a lot about how democratic it is. That's what they say to the Americans. They don't care very much now about democracy. They want their state to be Jewish. That's the dominant mentality. But you know, this is not surprising. Any time people who have privilege hear the talk about equality, they're scared. For them, equality means you're taking away my superior rights. Equality to them spells suppression. If you're taking away slavery, you're stealing my property. If you talk about equality for women, you're taking away my male prerogatives and privileges. So people don't give up their rights that quickly. They have to be forced by internal or external reasons to give up their rights. And right now, Israel feels that the world is turning against us. That the only thing that helps us is the United States. And if the United States changes its mind, as it might, we will be left alone. So instead of seeking peace through equality, through a coalition that believes that racism is bad, that superiority is bad, they build this idea that we are in danger. Just like in South Africa, the whites said, if we have majority rule, we will be massacred. They were not massacred in South Africa. They weren't. It is possible, and I mentioned that in this book, it is possible for a minority to thrive, not just survive, but thrive, and even be dominant in certain sectors while they are still a minority. The question is there a mechanism that allows for equality, that allows for... See, you're not going to be able to end hatred and discrimination, but you can outlaw discrimination in public affairs, in employment, in housing, in distribution of resources. This is basically what the US Constitution does. It outlaws that type of official discrimination. Discrimination continues, and it's an ongoing struggle to work for equality. But at least it is not part of the established laws of the country that they discriminate.
This may be irrelevant, I don't know, a dumb idea, but it seems to me that the Israelis think that this land is theirs from, like that horrible book says, time immemorial. But if you look at the story of Abraham, he was an immigrant. He immigrated from Iraq, probably. And then the other Jews who came in later were also immigrants from Europe. And the people who were there all the time, I think, were Palestinians and their ancestors.
Okay, I very deliberately refuse to go into the type of historical justification for either party. I could do it. I can do it very well. I also refuse to go into the international law aspects. What does international law say? who has a greater claim under international law. I refuse to go into the moral, who is more of a victim, who suffered more, who violated human rights more. I could do it. I know I can do it. In other places I do it. I said, taking things as they are today. Is there a way out? Is there a solution that commends itself to people of goodwill on both sides? Is there something that you can at least aspire to? A vision that you can say, yeah, that's worth working towards, rather than work towards a Jewish state or a Palestinian Arabs, which requires me to continue fighting and fighting till I totally eliminate the other side. Or they eliminate me, yeah. And I'm saying we can't eliminate each other. We are destined to live together, and we have to find a formula that allows us to do that. Yes, that. Go ahead.
Could you say something? Oh, I'm really a former Zionist Jew. Could you say something about the problem of United States and international complicity?
Question is, what about the United States and international complicity? And the answer, I think, is clear. I wish the United States was not involved. In fact, it is involved. It's involved on the wrong side of history. It's involved in being directly complicit in the genocide that's taking place, not only by providing money, which it does, not only by providing weapons, which it does, but mostly by providing diplomatic cover, whether it's through the veto at the United Nations or through pressuring other countries not to be involved in international law, and the ICC and the ICJ. So the United States is involved, unfortunately, as part of the problem rather than the solution. However, it's possible for all that to change, and I think it will change. And when it changes, I think you'll see things change very quickly and very rapidly. And I just am hoping that we here, as Americans, will make sure that it happens in the right way. Not out of anti-Israeli sentiment, but out of really caring for both Israeli Jews and Palestinian Arabs, as well as international law itself.
I hope you consider this. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Rick Stagenborn. I hope you consider this appropriate, but you didn't mention your legal NGO that's documenting human rights violations. And I just read that the Knesset has introduced 2 pieces of legislation designed to destroy the work of you and that's LMN.
Yes. Al-Haq. The question is, what about the organization I've been involved with, Al-Haq, which is a human rights organization? Israel has declared Al-Haq to be a terrorist organization. The United States government has also imposed, or at least announced, sanctions against Al-Haq for daring to collect information and present it to the International Criminal Court. For daring to do what it's supposed to do, to work on human rights. So yes, we do have a problem. In fact, it's curious that Israel, which for many years pretended to be part of the democratic world, the only democracy in the Middle East, the rule of law, wonderful independent courts, etc., these days they don't care. These days they openly say, we will do what we want because we are powerful enough to do it. And they are encouraged by hearing sounds coming from this part of the world, from this country, that also treats international law as irrelevant, that asks Zelensky, what cards do you have to play? That's what's important. We are strong enough. Who is Denmark? Maybe we need to take Greenland. Maybe we need to take the Panama Canal. Maybe we need to take Canada and call it the 51st state. This type of total disregard for international law and international norms is very common in Israel today. In Israel, you hear that all the time. There's a new word in Hebrew now that you hear all the time. It's called so what. Literally, it has entered the Hebrew lexicon. Yeah, international law and the Geneva Convention, so what? Yeah, the International Criminal Court says, we can't do, so what? Yeah, we are killing babies, and yeah, we are cutting off food, and yes, we want to destroy all basis for life in Gaza and make it unlivable. So what? So what? We can get away with it. As long as the United States is allowing us. It is something to think about. Do we live in a world which is based only on power? Or do we have some respect for international law and the opinion of countries and the judgment of history on us and on our children?
This is going to be the hardest question because it's coming from my son. So my question is that the two-state solution idea keeps there. Like France is supporting, and England. France is supporting, saying we're going to declare recognition for Palestine, and we support the two-state solution, and everybody else does. So my question is, when all these governments are talking about the two-state solution, what should the response be?
For many countries, you're right. The issue of a two-state solution is one step in the right direction. However, it has become an alibi to avoid dealing with the real conflict. Because we're working for a two-state solution. Someday there will be a Palestinian state. We don't know when and we don't know how. The people who talk about a two-state solution, who are not willing to challenge the settlements, to roll back the settlements, are lying. It's an alibi. And when I discovered this about 7 years ago when I met Thomas Dine, who used to be the head of AIPAC for 20 years. And I said, I want to ask you a question. What's the position of AIPAC? Before I finished the sentence, he said, two-state solution. Yes, AIPAC is the Zionist lobby that uses a lot of power over Congress. And yeah, they own the Congress in many ways, yes. When I asked him, what is your position? He quickly said, two states. Really? AIPAC supports the two-state position? No. It's their alibi. It's their way to avoid dealing with the issues that are raised by the occupation. If you truly believe in a two-state solution, you start demanding an end to the settlement and an end to the occupation and rolling back the settlements, but none of them are doing it. So this is what I would say to anybody who says they support the two-state solution. I say, wonderful. I used to support it. I used to work very hard for it. And the only reason I moved beyond that is because I became convinced that it is no longer possible. So I would tell these countries that now recognize or belatedly started recognizing Palestine. It's very interesting that these countries only started recognizing the state of Palestine when their own population rose up and say, this genocide is horrible. You have to do something. Okay, we'll do something. We will recognize the state of Palestine, but there will be no consequences to this recognition. So anybody who tells you they believe in two-state solution, say, great, wonderful. What are you doing to end the occupation of the West Bank? Never mind. Never mind the rest of Palestine. And if they tell you nothing, we don't do BDS, boycotts, divestment, and sanctions. We don't cut off aid from Israel as long as it's occupying these territories. We want to see concrete action to allow people to move in and out of Gaza and the West Bank, and allow people to have open borders and be allowed to bring in food and medicine. Then you really don't believe in a two-state solution. You're just lying to me. This is just an alibi for you not to deal with the problem that you're facing.
Hi, I'm Karen McCowan, and I'm a member of People for Peace and Justice in Palestine. And thank you for coming. I would love to hear your take on the role of Christian Zionism, Christian nationalism in this country, and its tentacles in the controlling party. And if you see any hope or any signs that that is changing.
First of all, Christian Zionism is really more of a political than a theological group. It is beginning to become weaker, including among groups like evangelicals who used to support it. Especially young people no longer really accept that position. Christian nationalism, which is really a form of white supremacist, while they were supportive, very supportive of Zionism and the state of Israel, are also now questioning again, why should we be paying money and weapons to a country that has free health insurance and free college education to everybody, while we can't afford to do that to our own people? Because these people, their support of Zionism and the state of Israel is very shallow and can change very quickly, because they really don't like Jews or Muslims or Catholics or Latinos or African American or anybody else who's not like them. They may find it politically convenient to pretend to be supportive of the state of Israel, but it's not because they like Jews or they care about them. This is why I want to make it clear, in case you had any question about it. Anti-Jewish bigotry and racism and discrimination is wrong and evil and sin, and we should oppose it. And we should oppose it on principle, not because we like Palestinians and we hate Israel. So you have to have a principled opposition to all forms of racism, rather than pretend that you do. Thank you.
All right. We'll make the questions shorter and the answers even shorter. Hi, Jonathan. My name is Steve Goldman, and I really appreciate your passion and your book and your knowledge and your being here. And I want to express something and hear your response to it. You spoke about Israel wanting peace and after the '67 war and everything. I would say, from my background in nonviolent communication, the deeper need is to feel safe. Jews want to feel safe. And I say that as a Jewish American who had a stepmother who was a survivor of Auschwitz. And even though Israel is armed to the teeth with tanks and airplanes and nuclear weapons, they still don't feel safe. And when I was there, like, all these people walking around with guns, M16 rifles everywhere, walking around with guns. Can you talk about things that Palestinians can do
and Palestinian leaders and Arab leaders and other leaders in the world and Americans can do to give Jews a sense of safety, of feeling safe, so they'll let go of this craziness that I'm just outraged by what Israel is doing and the U.S. is doing. But I know that at the base is this fear of annihilation, that it'll happen again. And it's there.
You'll be surprised. I think it's a very good question. I think one thing we can do is tell them that weapons don't get you security. If you feel unsafe, we don't give you more tanks. We don't feed that wolf on your left shoulder that says we need more weapons. I know you tell them that your safety lies in the safety and security of your Palestinian brothers and sisters. That's where you get the safety. It's a tough sell, I know, because Israelis have been indoctrinated by Zionism. You'd be shocked that the Nazis were correct. Blood and iron is the only thing that counts. And we need to tell them, no, that's not true. Your safety is not built on weapons and military might. Your safety is built on legitimacy and acceptance, and that only comes through justice through the Palestinians, and not by having more weapons be given to you.
So I'm going to ask, what about capitalism? Because so many of the support, for AIPAC comes from billionaires. And to what extent are they motivated by greed? And particularly the military-industrial complex that is so integrated with Jewish, and I'm not saying Jewish, but Israeli military. Okay, so this is a big global engine supporting capitalism.
Oh boy. I only have 2 minutes, so I will only tell you that the influence of money in US politics is horrible. It is not only endangering Israelis and Palestinians, it's also endangering democracy in this country. It's endangering the environment. It's endangering human rights. It's endangering international cooperation against everything. So yes, we do need to address that, but I don't have time to do it now. Sorry.
Okay, my question for Jonathan. What is FOSNA? What are you doing?
Thank you. I am now executive director of FOSNA, Friends of Sabil North America. Sabil is a Palestinian Christian liberation theology movement representing all denominations. We are a pacifist group. We believe in justice. We are an ecumenical group representing all denominations. FOSNA, I really would urge you to look at our website. It's fosna.org, fosna.org, or you can sign the paper at the table there so that you'll get our weekly newsletter, and I write a weekly blog also at FOSNA. We are not dogmatically, but unashamedly Christian and Palestinian and nonviolent. We believe in nonviolence and we believe in justice for Palestine.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for please. My name is Reza Behnam. I have been a resident in Lane County for the past 40 years. I've gone to high school here. I've got my degrees. I have a PhD in political science and law, and I have been an active, strong supporter of Palestine. By my writing, I used to write frequently for the Register Guide and the Oregonian as well as Christian Science Monitor. So one of my problems with, by the way, I want to thank you, this church, and whoever invited us, the distinguished speaker. One of the things that would have helped this get together would have been a discussant. In other words, after a distinguished speaker would have given his
points, then discussing would have taken out from some of the points that the main speaker did not have to cover. Chief among them, let me tell you briefly that the state of Israel, if you want to call it a state, was born in violence. If you have read it, currently one of my articles is going around the globe. You're welcome to look at it. It's called From Declaration to Disposition: The Theft of Palestinian Land and the Birth of Israel. The point is, nobody talked about, and I distinguish it, he had quite a few points to discuss, but the way Israel was built was on a letter. I have gone through the trouble of finding the original letter, and it's embedded in my article. It's called the Balfour Letter. It is basically 119 words, but 67 of it deal with how Israel is to be born. Israel was not born in the pages of the Bible. This is a church. Please leave the mythical story of Israel behind and pay attention to see how it really came into being. Therefore, with all deference to our distinguished speaker, I don't believe Israel is going to go away peacefully. The best thing I can tell you is our former, very distinguished reporter, correspondent by the name of Helen Thomas. Helen Thomas said, basically, the current population of Israel should go where they come from. It is very difficult for Palestinians to live next door to someone who has killed generation of you for 80 years. For 80 years, ladies and gentlemen, there is not a single sound that comes from the United States that describes the pain of Palestine and its people. It's silent. I went to high school here. There is no textbook in high school. There is nothing. Absolutely nothing. So therefore, I'm sorry to say, you see, I don't have time to rebut some of the points that our distinguished speaker gave, but at the same time, I think it's worth talking about it.
Where can we get that? Where can we get your story? The New Yorker, what date?
No, it's not that. My article, I live in New York.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
I work with the Zionist
Okay.
My article is...
Your point is well taken.
My article is going around today is in the Counterpunch.
Okay.
Today is Counterpunch. I mean, the title.
I deliberately avoided going into the history. I had a lot to say about the history.
History is disinfected.
Excuse me. The Balfour Declaration, I'm very well aware of. The bitter history, the suffering of the Palestinian people, the human rights violations, I'm well aware of. There are times when I do address these things in great length. I deliberately avoided it to say that we are now at a juncture where we need to move forward. It may be possible, it may not be possible, but I want to say that we should have a vision for the future, not only for the past. I fully respect the Palestinian who says, I cannot accept. They have to all go back where they came from. But I would tell that Palestinian friend, to do that, you really need to thoroughly defeat, including militarily, the state of Israel, and create so much bloodshed and destruction. I am opting for something different. And I fully respect, if you want to fight and continue to fight, go ahead. God bless you. I don't think you will, but God bless you. Go ahead. And I also say the same thing to any Israeli Zionist. If you really think you can totally destroy and abolish the Palestinian people, you're mistaken. We will continue to survive even if we have no weapons. With every possible advantage on your side, you have failed to destroy Palestinian nationalism. The young people today are more clear about their identity as Palestinians than their parents and grandparents were. So we need to find a way for these two to live together, and I think we have a way for them to live together. If not, they will continue to fight forever.
Thank you. I agree very much with your vision, your view of what should be over in the Middle East. My question is, what should each one of us do here in this room when we wake up tomorrow morning to help make that happen?
Wonderful, wonderful question. Wonderful question. I think that there are many things we can do incrementally towards that vision. We don't have to wait till that vision comes about. For example, we can work to end the siege of Gaza. Allow food and medicine and freedom of movement in and out of Gaza with no restriction and limitations. That's something you can work towards. Feed Gaza. Prevent the use of starvation as a weapon. Number two, bring the war criminals to justice. I don't care if they are Hamas or if they are Arab leaders or if they are American leaders or if they're Israeli leaders. Those who have committed war crimes and crimes against humanity should be brought to justice, should not be free to roam the world and go into different countries as if they are ordinary people. They're not. They are criminals, they are monsters. They have to be brought to justice. Here's another thing that you can work on. 3, call Israel to account for its actions in the West Bank. There's no Hamas there. There's no armed resistance there. And yet every day they are going around uprooting trees, killing people, including American citizens. There's 4 villages around Ramallah, which are 70% of them are Palestinian Americans with citizenship, who are being attacked almost daily. Their trees uprooted, their homes and cars burned, and they're shot and killed by total thugs who are Jewish settlers. Bring an end to that, work on that. Bring acceptance and recognition to Palestinians and Palestinian voices. Right now, you can't even come to the United States with a Palestinian passport, or laissez-passer, because they are prevented. These are interim steps, okay? And the apartheid regime insists on laws that should be applied equally to Arabs and Jews alike, whether it's in the West Bank or in Israel itself. The fight against apartheid is a necessary fight. Again, all these steps are short, far short of the vision I described, but they are concrete steps. And finally, I think, is work inside the churches against Christian Zionism. Work against AIPAC and its influence in politics. Challenge your Congress people who are sending money and weapons and support for the state of Israel. There are many things that you can do, including even using the word Palestine and wearing a kufiyya, which is now being prevented in many places. Speak up for your own freedoms of expression, academic freedom. Use BDS, boycotts, divestments, and sanctions against corporations and individuals who are involved in this ongoing genocide. And dare your churches to start using the word genocide and call it for what it is. These are concrete things that you can do immediately. You don't have to wait until we create this new wonderful vision of a single state to start working for justice.
Thank you, Jonathan. We have Jonathan's books there if you want to purchase any of them. So feel free to look at the table, and there are other books. that you, if you wish, you can purchase. Also, we have a petition for our senators. We can sign it. Even if you have signed it before, sign it again. I would say sign a petition every day and send it to your senator. They need to hear from us. And if you want to make a donation for the people in Gaza, there is something there. There's a jar there. You can put your money in it. And well, again, also, if you want to connect with People for Justice and Peace in Palestine, a group that got us organized this, you can write, there is one sheet of paper where you can sign your name and email address, and we will connect with you. But thank you so much for coming. God bless you.